Welcome to Rethink You, bringing you ideas, inspiration, and motivation to start living the life you were created to live. Here is your host, author, trainer, speaker, and coach, and founder of Rethink You, Kim Lemmings.
Hi there, it's Kim again, and welcome back to the Rethink You podcast. I wanted to say that today's interview with Taneisha Ramsey is more than an interview. I almost want to say, welcome to church. Her story and her testimony are powerful, and I'm sure that you are going to love listening to her as much as I do. Taneisha also blesses us with a piece of her poetry. So without further ado, here's this episode with Taneisha Ramsey. Well, hello, Taneisha, and welcome. I'm so excited that you have joined us today. Taneisha Ramsey, author of The Affair, What's Next, 911, No More Fear. And now she's back again with her newest book, Daring to Love. I also believe she has a movie coming out, so you want to hang out and hear about that. Taneisha, welcome. Tell us your story.
Oh, Kim, thank you. I'm so honored to be here. It's such a pleasure to just be on a platform with someone as great as you. Today is going to be a great day, and I'm just honored to be here. And so a little bit about my story. One of the reasons why I write is because I think it's so important for us to break shame and guilt cycles. For so long, we hold on to things that happened to us in the past, even though God has brought us through those areas in our life. But we continue to bring them back up again. We continue to allow that bully in our life to keep reliving that thing as if it happened again and again. And so one of my missions is to help free women, free people from shame and guilt cycles, because if I can be transparent about some of the things that has happened to me in my life, I pray that that gives someone else the courage and the vulnerability to share the things that God has brought them through. We know that trials and tribulations end with testimonies, right? If we allow them to be a testimony. Sometimes our pride and ego wants us to keep quiet and seal our lips, but not me. God told me that no man will shame you. And so I let it all out. I share my story. So a little bit about my story. When I was 17 years old, I walked into my mother's room and she was about to commit suicide. She had a gun pointed to her head because my father had betrayed her and had an affair. My mom's world was my father, and I didn't understand why I wasn't her world too. So I was devastated at the fact that she was willing to leave this earth and leave me behind. But I begged my mother not to pull the trigger, and she didn't. She did not, and I'm so thankful that that didn't happen on that day. But it took something from me. Honestly, it took my faith and love away, because I felt like if my hero, my father, could betray my mother, and although that was their relationship, that was their business, I don't know what was even going on at the time, but the fact was I never wanted to give someone that much power over me. And so I lived the rest of my 20-something years of life running from love. Every relationship that I got into was abusive because I wasn't willing to give someone my full heart. And when you're not willing to give someone all of you, they're not going to give you all of them. And when you're already thinking, I'm going to lie, I'm going to scheme, I'm going to make sure I don't get hurt, so I'll be the first one to cheat, you wind up attracting people that are dishonest because you're not being trustworthy. So we have to be careful that we look for people that when you're looking and you have that type of mindset, that's what you're going to attract, even though that's not what you're looking for, right? That's what you're going to attract back to you. So subconsciously, I kept attracting those type of relationships. And I found myself at different times being abused, not only physically, emotionally, financially, all of any form of abuse that you could experience, I experienced. And so, yes, it was very traumatic. My life wound up being something that, out of a horror story. You wouldn't even think that I've been through some of the things that I've been through. And I'm sure some of your audience members, they're saying, I don't look like what I've been through. And thank God for that, right? Thank
Yes.
God I've
Yes.
been through the fire, but I don't
Yes.
smell like smoke, right? And the
Right.
very thing that I was trying to avoid, because I said I never wanted to be my mother. So I never wanted to give someone my full heart and then wind up with a gun to my head. But I still created that same exact thing. It was almost like a generational curse. 25 years later, I had an affair with my ex-husband. A close friend told my husband, and he put a gun to my head. He wanted to know the truth. He wanted to know who it was, what I was doing, and I froze. I froze. But the thing that I could remember to say was, help me, God. Help me, God. And when I said those words, help me, God, I could hear God's voice so clear say, you are not being the daughter that I created you to be. Stop running from love. And so my immediate response was, I'm sorry. I said that out loud, I'm sorry. And when I said that, he dropped the gun and we cried. And I finally told another human being what I had experienced growing up. And I thought that God was telling me to give my husband at the time my full heart, because I had never gave another human being my full heart. I was too afraid to love someone, right? To give them that power.
Yeah.
And that's where some of my poetry comes in. No More Fear is about finally not letting fear paralyze you, right? To push past that fear. And no, I had never knew God's love before. And since I didn't know his love, I didn't love myself. So I accepted things that people who love themselves wouldn't accept, right? So once he changed me and once he started shaping and molding me into the daughter he created me to be, I started falling in love with him. That in turn made me fall in love with myself. That in turn allowed me to love others the way that God loves me. And I gave God my heart, right? My heart today is still sitting in God's hand, and I won't take it out of his hand. I'll give my love away freely. I'll give my love away freely. But what I will not do is take my heart back and try to do what I want to do with my heart. It's safe and secure in his hand. And so God has completely transformed my life. I had been disconnected in the past. I didn't view myself, my body as a temple. So I was very promiscuous because of past things that happen to women, molestation, abuse, all of those things that you have to cope with. And in order to cope, sometimes you disconnect. You disconnect from your temple and you say, well, that's my body. It's not my spirit. It's not my heart. It's not my mind. You can have my body, right? But you can't have all of me. So I'm so thankful that I'm whole now, that I see myself as a whole individual, as God's daughter, that my identity is secure in him. And I don't look for validation in people, places, or things. My validation comes from him. Because for a long time, because I had that type of history, I ran away from that history trying to prove myself. I wanted everybody to know that Taneisha was not a failure. Taneisha wasn't just an exotic dancer. Taneisha's marriages just didn't fail, that she was more than that. So I got that master's degree. I chased the corporate ladder and became my own CEO. All of those things that God just said, none of those things matter. That's all superficial validation that you're chasing. And so once he healed me, we get to a situation where he says, well, I want you to write this book, because now it's about healing others. It's not about you anymore. And so that's the thing that we have to remember. When we get healed, we become the antidote to someone else's pain, right? They can hope inspiration in us. So that's what I want to be. I'm not here to impress anyone. I'm only here to inspire and be an antidote so that you can see, if I could come through some of the things and challenges that I've been through in my life, remain resilient, remain faithful, that you can do the same thing.
Right. Well, I wanted to respond to a few things. That's so powerful. And I know that I didn't want to stop you at any point, because what you say is always so deep and so beautiful. And I remember hearing you read your poetry, and that was when it just struck me to the core. And I'm like, this woman has a gift to the world. So I wanted to just respond to a few things that you said and draw attention to them for our listeners, because I think there's some powerful lessons in here. And that conflict of response at a young age, where you had fear and compassion for your mother, but then also sort of broken trust in your father, that must have been a very difficult emotional journey for you. And I'm struck by the fact that when we're young, and often as young as children, we are struck by these life events that happen, and our brain has to make sense of it. So our brain makes up these lies that it stores. And in your case, people can't be trusted. I'll never give my heart to anyone. And those are the lies and the narratives that keep us trapped. And I mean, I know that's what I love to do, is to help people rethink themselves. And it starts with that surrender. It starts with admitting and exposing these things to the light and being able to say, this is no longer working for me. So, being able to surrender and redeem parts of ourselves, it's just such a powerful lesson. I mean, your life is a testimony to that. And that's certainly how I know how God works, how, he takes us through sometimes some terrible valleys, but it makes us secure in him and secure enough to be able to take others through their valleys, because we've been healed and redeemed. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and say, what an incredible story. So I want you to keep talking, because I love listening to you, and I know my listeners do too. But that, the first few minutes, they were so rich, and I'm like, I want to make sure we don't miss any of these important ahas that come out of people's stories. So please, continue. So, as you live in this life of freedom, tell me what you're doing as you help others with this message. And I don't know if you're able to share an excerpt of your poetry today, but if not, I'm going to make sure that people know where to find this book, because, boy, I can't wait to buy it myself. But, please tell us more, Taneisha.
Yeah, sure. And I would love to share. Actually, I have another poem that I wrote, 911, because that was the day that I got saved. So I got
goodness,
saved.
That's amazing.
Yes, I got saved 9/11/2/16, and I wrote a poem about it. And so this is what I said. 911 is the day God chose to save me. It must have been an extreme emergency. I could just feel his sense of urgency. My heart, it began to beat real fast. I never felt nothing like this in the past. How long was this feeling going to last? For the first time, it wasn't about anyone else. My legs seemed to walk to the altar all by themselves. My body felt joy. I wasn't in control. The Holy Spirit had taken over my soul. What do I do now? Join a church to somehow try to prove my worth? Or so I can too learn every Bible verse? Or look at people funny when they slip up and curse? Honestly, those were just my thoughts at first. Stereotyping is what most of us do, but that get upset when someone does it to you. Quick to judge, have no facts, no foundation. Looking at God's house like it's just another organization, when God is raising up an entire nation, and it's going to happen in my generation. Please don't act like the enemy doesn't exist. He has our minds all up in a twist. Every single day you saying, now why I do this? Somehow lust became her master. Love out the window, not even a factor. She just needs a glimpse some reminder that God sees so much more in her. She was created with a faith so strong. Anywhere with God is where she belongs. Church, malls, or even the grocery store. A relationship with God is what I live for. I'm not about to get caught up in all this religion when it's because of God that we're even living. We have to stop all this insane division. We have to stop all this insane division when it's because of him that we're even living. When he calls, go to him. You must. Don't hesitate or put up any fuss. This is a call that only Jesus can deliver. You're the one that turns out to be the winner. Look at me, and I'm just a beginner. 911. To God be the glory.
Oh, amen. Taneisha, as I said, I can't wait for your book. The messages are so powerful, and thank you for sharing that with us. Because there's so much in that I certainly know for myself. I'm going to go back and listen to that several more times because the meaning and the depth in it is huge. So thank you for that.
Thank you for allowing me to share. I
Yes,
didn't know I was
yes.
going to share that. It just, the Holy Spirit's like, say what I want you to say. It's time for you to say this one.
That's right. Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about this book that's coming out and what else you're up to. How do people find you? First of all, I will put all this information in the show notes, but for those of you who may be watching the video, it's Taneisha Now, Taniesha, right?
EI. My mom didn't do the I before E except after C.
Okay.
Forgive her.
So it's it's Taneisha. TaneishaNow.com is her website. Her book is Daring to Love. And of course, I'll have all these links. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you want to go to rethinkyou.com and click on podcasts. And in the podcast episode notes, I will put all of the information that Taneisha is sharing with us. So now that I've said all of that, take us away. Tell us what you're up to.
Yes. One of the reasons why my website and my platform is Taneisha Now is because it's about who we are now. It doesn't matter who we were in the past. And sometimes we get hung up on our past. So we only have this moment, the now. We don't even know what tomorrow is going to bring. We don't even know if we have tomorrow. So right now, in this moment, are you living the best version of you? Are you giving 100% of you? And only you know what 100% of you looks like. Because we can deceive a lot of people. We can make it seem like we're successful in doing a lot of things. A lot of people would look at me, my friends. I had a 6-figure job at a hospital. I had the corner office, and I still wasn't satisfied because I knew God was calling me to do something bigger. And so I said, okay, God, I'll do something bigger. I'll start my own home health agency. That's still in nursing, right? So I still had the security of nursing. And he's like, I didn't say that I'm looking for you to do what's secure for you. So being obedient to God has just been an amazing thing, where you're able to trust him, let go of the security of the things that you know. So I was a nurse for 17 years, and me stepping out away from nursing, stepping into God's calling on my life, which is to speak to women, speak to those who are hurt, speak to the lost, right? I asked God, I said, how will I reach the lost? I'm not a pastor, I'm not a minister. I don't even know church protocol. I wasn't raised in the church, right? When to stand, when to sit, what's going on, today. I'm like, we're standing? Okay, we're standing. Here we go. And so I asked him, and he simply said that my life story would reach the lost, right? Because I am the woman at the well. I am the one that Jesus said, oh, you have 5 husbands? And I'm like, no, I only had 3. He's like, yeah, I know. The other 10 weren't your husbands, right? But you've done some things in your life. And I know a lot of people can relate to making poor decisions, and we just got to take ownership of those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And so now that I'm out of the surviving stage and I'm in the thriving stage, like I'm not looking back at anything on my life unless it's to give God the glory for what he's brought me through. I'm not looking back to beat myself up, because at one point I didn't even realize that I had become my biggest bully. Like, I was so ashamed of the fact that I used to dance at a nightclub, that I used to be an alcoholic, that I was an adulterer, that all these things happened to me. Even though God pulled me through, I would always look at myself in the mirror and say, why did you have to make all those mistakes? Why did you do this? Right? So I became my biggest bully. And so, as much as I hate bullying, because I was bullied by my uncles and I've always stood up, I've always been an advocate for the underserved, for people who don't have a voice. I've always advocated for that. I didn't realize that I wasn't advocating for the little girl in me, right? I wasn't advocating for the person in me that didn't know better, so she didn't do better. That's the only reason. She did what she had to do to survive, right? And so helping women to get to the point where they're out of survival stage, and even though you may be out of survival stage as far as finances, emotions, things like that, you may not even realize the stronghold that's still on you, right? And so yeah, and so I had that bully stronghold, that shame and guilt stronghold was still on me. So it was impossible for me to take flight and thrive, because I had too much weight holding me back. I had too much fear holding me back. And now I tell the enemy, I talk to the enemy like he's an ex that I don't never want to see again. I mean, I gotta make them that real for me. I can't just act like it's just like some invisible thing. No, I gotta put a face to it. Like, get your hands up off of me. We're not doing this. You're not gonna stop me from my destiny. I will do the things that God has called me to do. And so that's how we have to really identify those pieces in our own mind that are holding us back. Sometimes it's not your family, it's not your husband, it's not your situation. It is your own mind that's tricking you into believing that you're not good enough. And so I'm here today to say you are good enough. You are great. You are magnificently made. You are created in God's image. Therefore, you're a masterpiece. Like Les Brown said the other night, you're only a masterpiece and a piece of the master. So you are more than you could ever imagine, and greater is he that lives inside of me, that lives in this world. And so I will continue to use my voice to empower women, to be a voice for God. Whatever he tells me to say, that's what I'm going to say. I don't have any ministerial background. All I have is a personal relationship with God, and I let him lead me and guide me. And I have a love affair. Me and God's relationship is my new love affair, and it ain't none like it. I'm telling you, I've had affairs in the past, but this love affair right here is the best that I could ever ask for.
Oh, that's so true. I have to just respond to a couple of things that you said, because excuse me, listening to those words as you were speaking, that people, I know how useful it is to go back and have a conversation with your younger self, because releasing yourself from the shame that has actually come out of guilt, but the guilt's been carried for so long that you start believing it of yourself and it turns into shame. It's such an important part of that redemption and surrender and turning your life around. And I love that. And it's interesting that you say you think of the devil as the ex, because I often say, my ex-husband, ex being the operative word. And at the time we think we're doing the right thing. And, I don't wish any harm in my case to my ex, but I said, we sometimes just make bad decisions. I shouldn't have married him, and that's not his fault. And, making these decisions and setting ourselves free from our past is so important to reinventing ourselves. And so I just want to acknowledge that, what you said about that. And, full disclosure to my audience, Taneisha and I are together, and I think we're both speaking at the summit next week. And
I'm not speaking in the summit.
You're not speaking in the summit, but you will be soon. You will be soon.
Yes.
But we are both working with Les Brown right now. But I just had a great idea, which tends to happen. So I'll talk to you about that after the podcast. But I think I've just had an awesome idea based on what you were saying. So this releasing of our old narratives and stepping into the life that God really called us to do is just so valuable.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the book, Daring to Love. What is it about? Why should people care to read it? When will it be out?
Okay, so it's out now, and you can get it right off of my website, or you can go to my publisher. If you don't want it personalized, you can go to my publisher, Wordy, and that's Wordy with 3 E's, triple E's, Word, and then 3 E's. You could go directly to my publisher, or you could go to my site. I think my book is about my life story, and I'm completely open about the things that happened in my life and how God transformed me, how he can transform you, how you're never too far away from his touch, how it doesn't matter the things that you think that are too bad, that are too much. It's never too much, that he wants us. He wants his daughters. He wants his sons. He wants a relationship with us. He wants us to put him first, right? And so after each chapter of my book, wherever I'm at in life, I have questions for you to analyze where you're at in life and to help you think about, are you making someone else pay the price for your history? Is it fair that you keep putting this man's face on every relationship, right, that you're in? Is it fair that because that person was a liar, you're suspicious of every single relationship? Is it fair that you're not being authentic, where you're hiding secrets, that you're keeping those things inside, but yet you want someone to know you, but you won't disclose who you are? How's somebody going to know you if you won't even say who you really are? Those things that happen in our past, it's important to share those things with the person you're with so they can help with triggers, right? Because there are things that still trigger me. And I'm remarried. I just celebrated my year anniversary, August 25th.
Congrats.
Yeah, so that's why my last name is now Ramsey. So I have married a man that God chose for me, not somebody that I chose, the man that God chose for me. And because I was in a different space in my life, now I'm saved, now I have a relationship with God, I attracted a God-fearing man. I attracted a man who loves God the way that I love him. I attracted a man who's just kind and compassionate, who's truthful and honest, because those are the things that I am now. So someone asked me the other day, how do I still deal with relationship triggers? And I said, well, one, I'm honest about the things that trigger me, like loud tones, and yelling, like high tones of voice, and then a tone, a certain tone. Those are triggers for me. So I made that very clear to my husband. But there's not that many times that I have to say, wait a minute, hold on, that's a trigger, for me, because it's only when he's frustrated or overwhelmed. We're human. There's times when stuff is going to bother us, and you don't mean to take it out on the person that's closest to you, but sometimes you do. So I just have to remind him that, hey, this is not the way that I communicate now. My standards of communication have elevated extremely. And so when you want to have a productive conversation, we can continue. If you want to pray about it, let's pray. But other than that, we're not going to continue this conversation. So get my book if you want to increase your communication, if you want to be authentic about the things that have happened to you, if you want to release shame and guilt. Because if I could share the things that I share in that book, and the only reason why I could share it is because God told me, man will never shame you. And so when he said, man will never shame you, I said, okay, hey, if God said to do it, I don't care what nobody says. I'm listening to God. He's the author
Love
and
it.
finisher of my life.
Love
Yes.
it. Love it. So tell me about the movie that I've heard about.
Yes. So Daring to Love is in the hands of Les Brown right now. And
Okay.
so it is going to be a movie. I want Tyler Perry to produce my movie because I think he does amazing. And I'm ready for Taraji P to play me because I just feel like she would do the best job at playing me. And so when the movie comes out, I cannot wait for it to be an Academy Award winning movie.
Absolutely.
Yes, it is time for us to share our story. I know that God told me to write this book, and when it first hit the stands and it wasn't having a lot of traction, I was like, okay, God, did you really tell me to write this? Yes, he did. But sometimes the revelation and the destination, they don't happen at the same time. But we want microwave results. And so we want everything to move fast. And when it doesn't happen quick enough, we start to doubt ourselves. We start to doubt God. And so we have to learn to be patient, right? Sit still and know that he is God and he'll open every door. There's never a door that he can't open. There's never a door that any man can shut that he opened. And so I'm walking into the doors now that God is opening for me. And it's all because I said yes and I said no and slammed the door shut on the old things that I used to do, even shut the door on my old business, being a nurse, all of that. Those are the things that I went to school for clinically, but I was born for this. I was born to help people break the shame and guilt cycles. I was born to speak. I was born to write, and I'm born to do the things that God has specifically designed me to do.
Powerful. Really great stuff, Taneisha. So thank you. Oh my goodness. I think that your message is going to be a blessing to so many people out there. And I just want to thank you again for speaking to us. But, you know, before we wrap, I always like to end by saying share one or two lessons that life has taught you that you would like the listeners to walk away with. I know there are probably many, but maybe just pick one and let's say, what is the number one lesson that your journey taught you?
My journey taught me so many things, but I would say, like I've been saying this whole call, not to look backwards, right? Not to be ashamed of the things that God has brought you through, not to allow something that happened to you when you were 15, 20, 30 to continue to bind your spirit, your heart in a space that's not free. When God has freed us from that situation physically, but mentally, you keep revisiting that. So I would say learning to not revisit my past unless it's to give God the glory, the credit that he deserves for all the things that he's done in my life. Because if your mind lives in the past, then you're still living in the past, even though you're physically in 2020. You're still living in 2000 when that situation or whenever the situation happened to you. That situation is over. That person is gone. Look around. They're not around. They're not here. So you don't have to keep having company with that person that's no longer in your life. So release yourself from that way of thinking and monitor your thoughts. That's another thing I would say has to be a lesson. I hear my thoughts. So when I'm not thinking the right thing, I shut that thing down and start replacing it with the right thing. If I hear something negative, why I question myself, why did you just have that thought? Right? Replace it with, you are wonderfully made. You are a daughter of the Most High King. So that positive thinking, that paradigm shift is true. We have to reaffirm what God says about us and not what people say about us. Stop calling Tyrone, Benita, Susie Q, and start calling God and asking him some questions so that he can talk to you and clear your mind.
Great stuff. Perfect lessons to take away, and really in keeping with Rethink You, because my listeners know my message. And as I said, I've just been honored and humbled to have you on the show today. And I wish you the best of luck, if that's the right term, because I know that God's all over this. And I'm blessed that we're on this journey together. And I'm sure that we'll be able to do another interview at some time in the future. And we'll look back on this first interview and say, remember when? And
Yes.
look what happened since, right?
Yes. I'm super excited to see all that God is doing for your show, for you, for your community. I want to hear from your listeners. I want you to tell me what some of the questions are.
Yes.
So that way I can come back and answer some of your listeners' questions, right?
That sounds wonderful.
Like,
yes.
So answer please, your questions.
Folks, feel free to email me via the website or comment in the podcast or in the YouTube channels. Taneisha and I are in constant contact, and I'll make sure that, I'll forward the information on to you. Thanks again. And that's a wrap.
Thank you.